Members, this is the appointed time, and we have a quorum. Thank you for attending this meeting of the Bills Committee on Product Eco-Responsibility Amendment Bill 2023. This is our fourth meeting. I'll now invite the administration to join us. Thank you. The administration has issued a response to matters raised at the meeting on the 25th of April. Please refer to LC paper CB bracket 1 558/2023 bracket 01. And now I'll invite the administration to walk us through the paper, and the members can ask questions regarding the paper. Thank you, Chair. After our last meeting, we provided a response on two questions. First, the definition of disposable, whether or not there are any other cases in other jurisdictions, and if there were any prosecution. First, we'll talk about the definition of disposable. According to Clause 33 of the Amendment Bill, a product is disposable if it is not designed to be used for the purpose for which it was designed more than once. Some may say that perhaps we need to take a more quantitative or scientific approach to define the word disposable, whether it can be used for 3 or 4 times. We have reviewed the definition of disposable in other jurisdictions. And we have also referred to a report issued by the UN dated the 16th of May regarding solving the plastic issues. And on it, the definition of disposable is that the product is intended to be used once only. And we find that this is a more reasonable approach to define the word disposable, and this will allow us flexibility during enforcement actions. And in other jurisdictions, since the relevant legislation generally came in force in recent years, so we have not been able to find any court judgment relating to the definition of disposable. As for the second question, regarding other plastic single-use plastic products, that means not tableware, which of them should be controlled or regulated? Indeed, when we talk about plastic products of a larger quantity, let's say plastic bottles, the products covered in the bill does not amount to that much. But we do have a very detailed breakdown. Let's say for the cheer stick, we do not keep statistics on the number of them disposed. But on a macro level, in a landfill, plastic accounts for about 20% of waste disposed there. All around the world, actions on plastic control has been launched. And in the UN report dated the 16th of May, well, the reason for the publication of this report is that in the coming year, the United Nations would like to come to an agreement with countries around the world on the control of plastic. So this report aims at providing information for negotiators of various countries around the world. One of the information provided is that in the future, the use of plastic should be reduced. The list that we drafted has drawn reference from the list based on a study of the Council for Sustainable Development. Many of the suggestions were made by members of the public. We have included them in the amendment bill for members' consideration. There are some that are clearly unnecessary and with available alternatives, and we will control them in the first phase of the legislation. But as for some other products, from a policy perspective, we would like to control the use of these products, but we need to look at comparable alternatives, non-plastic alternatives on the market before we implement the second phase. That is why there are two phases. We need to see whether there are available alternatives on the market. Thank you, Chair. Well, the administration has also given a response to the views provided by organizations and individuals at the meeting held on the 29th of April or in the written submissions. This is paper number CB-1558/2023-02. Perhaps I'll invite the administration to walk us through that paper as well before we discuss the issues together, since some of the views raised by members of the public are similar to the views of members. Thank you, Chair. Regarding the response to the views provided by organizations or individuals, there are several broad topics covered. First, regulating degradable plastic products. In the bill, we are not making the distinction of whether the plastic products are degradable or not. We need to look at the environmental factors of the end facilities, let's say in landfills. What factors that affect the degradability, such as temperature, humidity, etc. So for degradable plastics, we are treating them as any other types of plastics. We do not make this distinction in the bill, and they will be handled in the same way. And the reviews that there should be a ban on the import on related plastic products. I think we need to be careful about this because Hong Kong is an open trade market. And it may not be appropriate for us to impose any import or export control on certain products. We will monitor the situation to see if the control of these products will lead to a significant increase of import. But we believe that a ban on import is a rather significant action, and we need to tread carefully. And there were mention of prepackaged food or drinks item, including plastic cutleries. Let's say on paper cartons, plastic straws are included, or plastic forks included in cup noodles, etc. There are two considerations. Let's say on a drink carton, a plastic straw is attached. You can say that the straw is part of the packaging. The second consideration is that many of these food items are imported. And it may be difficult for us to exclude such items since they are imported from overseas. So at this current stage, we will not be controlling these plastic cutleries included in prepackaged food, but we will definitely look into the situation and see if the framework needs to be updated. As for the implementation timetable, there are views that the control measures should be implemented as quickly as possible. But actually, the time frame that we suggest is actually a more pragmatic time frame. there are affordable and available alternatives on the market. Let's say plastic fork or plates or knives, etc. So after the passage of the bill, the legislation will come into effect within 6 months. As for the second phase, about cup lids, container, and container lids, these products are available, the alternatives, I mean, but they are not that affordable. That is why we plan to implement the second phase in 2025. But we will review the market situation and see whether or not these alternatives are available by then. We won't forcefully go ahead with the second phase. So our major consideration is the availability of alternatives. Our current time frame is a rather pragmatic one. As for other suggestions, such as providing financial assistance or assistance on converting to eco-friendly tableware, as I said, these alternatives are widely available on the market, so these restaurants should not have any problems procuring eco-friendly tablewares. As for promoting plastic-free culture or disposable-free culture, this is something that the EPD is doing consistently. On scientific research, the Green Tech Fund has included a thematic research topic that is to encourage the industry to develop alternatives for disposable plastic tablewares. And on the WPRS, that is the Producer Responsibility Scheme on waste, electronic and electrical equipment, and commercial electrical equipment and recycling levy, some suggested that the cost of the appliances themselves should be taken into consideration. Well, we have reviewed the situation of the local sale of electrical appliances. That is why we have included the humidifier and tumble dryer and larger refrigerator and washing machines. Other appliances can be handled through green at community, such as electric cooker, etc. And they can be properly recycled there. If we were to add these appliances into our scheme, that means that a recycling levy will have to be charged, even for hair dryer or telephone, let's say for $10 or $20. We need to ensure that these smaller appliances can be recycled downstream. As for the price set, below $2,000, those appliances will be exempted. But we have to look at the recycling costs at WePark and other operation costs. That is how we calculate the recycling levy. If we are calculating the cost or the selling price of the appliances, then we will have to keep a constant eye on the prices on the market, and that may not be very feasible. The entire goal of the levy is to cover the cost of the producer responsibility scheme. So we don't think that it is appropriate to link the levy with the price of the products. Thank you.
So just now we mentioned a list of actions for follow-up as well as the administration's response. We also included public views heard from the public hearing. The administration has already responded to all these views. Personally, an issue that is close to my heart is if for the single-use plastic tableware imported into Hong Kong, distributed in Hong Kong, or sent to the landfill, have you ever conducted any assessment on the environment? Your response is actually lacking. we are very clear in multiple meetings. The mainstream view is that we need to regulate single-use plastic products, especially tableware. There is a very great amount of usage. Is it a suitable time to impose a ban across the board at this stage? Given the high amount of landfill, we need to strike a balance and weigh up the pros and cons. Do we still need to support the ban on these products? Another good example is non-medical supplies. That is, plastic gloves, I mean. We do not oppose lactose alternatives, such as lactose gloves. But right now, they play an important role. If you are not sure about the amount, we may need to be cautious. For some products that have special use, the epidemic has just passed, and we are still attaching great importance to environmental hygiene. It may be feasible to ban free distribution, but when it comes to banning the sale, we may have to wait until a later time before we can decide. But if you cannot give us a figure on the amount of disposal, then it may be difficult to do so. Environmental hygiene is very important at this stage. For example, in a restaurant, do not distribute gloves for free. Citizens might find this acceptable. But if you fail to provide this information, I am indeed disappointed. Which methods is suitable? What about the amount of disposal? They bear a close relationship. If you cannot give us such information, we may not be able to conduct an assessment in this connection. Four minutes. Mr. Chen Xiu-hong, Mr. Tong Li-che, Mr. Xiu Ka-fai, Mr. Yu Pak-lang, and Mr. Andrew Lam. 5 members will go with Mr. Chen Xiu-hong first. Thank you, Chairman. I agree with Chairman. In the opening remarks, we actually agree and support imposing a ban on certain plastic products, but we also need to consider feasibility. For example, Chair mentioned plastic gloves used in restaurants for eating baby pigeons. What about shopping bags? In theory, they should be banned as well. But on the contrary, one just has to pay $1 for the plastic shopping bag. For shopping bags, they are actually common in landfills, so we may need to have regard to different types to devise our regulation plans. For the administration's response to our meeting on the 25th of April, we asked about the definition of single use. We do not deliberately dwell on this point. But as the administration said, the DD said that we need to maintain flexibility, but we also need to prevent disputes and conflicts. So the government mentioned a list of jurisdictions from which we can draw reference. The administration has drawn reference from Wales in relation to the definition of single-use and disposable. The government's definition is a A product is disposable if it is not designed to be used for the purpose for which it was designed more than once or on more than one occasion. If the design is not as such, then the product will be deemed disposable. I am now referring to the administration's paper for New Zealand For other jurisdictions such as New Zealand and other parts of Australia, there is a definition for which it was designed more than once or on more than one occasion. Does it mean that it is exempted from regulation? In order to prevent disputes in the course of taking legal action, then I recommend amending the definition. This definition actually does not roll off the tongue. Can we amend it? Mr. Locke. Yes, the design mentioned design more than once or more than one occasion. According to the definition used by the UN Environment Program, the definition is once, and we can draw reference from this. It is not possible to specify the number of times about several occasions. It is not possible to specifically write down the number of occasions. Give you an example, when we cut a cake, there is actually a large piece of something. But in fact, you can actually use it for more than once. You can keep it in the office and you can use it whenever you like. So it is difficult to draw a line. So we need to weigh up the pros and cons so that it will not cause much disturbance to the public, and this is what we need to consider. Mr. Tong Li-Che, the major direction of the bill is not disputed, but it involves at least three groups. One, the environmentalists. They have views on the coverage, the scope, as well as the timeline. From the perspective of operators, are there any alternatives in terms of function, in terms of price? Are there really alternatives next from a perspective of consumers? Do they need to make any compromise about quality of life and convenience in life? Members mentioned striking a balance. In the ordinance, as the chair pointed out, we hope that it is flexible so that the administration or the government can actually maintain flexibility in carrying out all these changes. Changes happen anytime. Well, I mean, can the government have an absolute discretion? The Federation of Hong Kong Industries wrote to us asking about the timeline of the second phase. So, for standards and factors for consideration, in the previous meetings you touched upon this point, but I mentioned three areas. Do you have a more accurate grasp of these areas, or can you list some factors? So that we will have a better understanding. for different ordinances. It is not possible to cover all factors in the ordinance, and it is not appropriate to do so either. So, will the government work on this? It is no easy task. But if you do not work on these, people may think that they have actually no choice. So, when you're under pressure, will you keep dragging your feet? That is my question. Mr. Lok DD, thank you, Mr. Tong Li-che. You rightly pointed out the challenge. There are divergent views in society. The suggestion we proposed this time. First, we need to carefully consider whether all the items that we want to regulate have alternatives, not just in terms of function, but also in terms of price. Take cutlery as an example. For example, for straws, forks, knives, you may have seen some wooden alternatives, and the price is actually similar. So, in this connection, we are confident that we can first work on these so-called mature products. The fact that we divided it into two phases is to reduce pressure or not impose any pressure on people. We need to make sure that it is actually easy to buy these items. It is durable, it will not lead to water leakage, etc. But what about some items that cost $10? Well, this is not possible either. So I mentioned time and again that we need to consider the market situation, that is the availability in the market, to decide on the time when the second phase will start. What about 2025? That is our plan. If in 2025 these markets still are not available, and that might cause difficulty to the operation of restaurants, we will not bulldoze this bill either. For example, if there are 10 items on the list, for the first 5 items they will be enacted in the first phase and the following 5 items will be enacted in phase 2. Then we will decide on an effective date on the first phase. Then we will specify the effective date when we have one for phase 2. The effective date will also be subsidiary legislation. It will be subject to the consent of the Legislative Council. We need to consult members about the time. Then, afterwards, only after that, we will issue the notice in phase 2. Through this method of different phases, we want to strike a balance between different people's requests, while at the same time attaining the goal of reducing plastic. But meanwhile, we need to make sure that we will not exert too much pressure on some sectors. Reducing plastic waste is actually imminent. We need to work on these. The onus is on everyone to do so. Whether to operators, to citizens, we need to minimize the impact or the difficulty. Next, Mr. Peter Schill.
Thank you, Chair. In our last meeting, many members offered their views to the administration. And in their opening remarks, the administration has given us a response on their views of different products, such as plastic gloves, as mentioned by Chair just then, because I understand that colleagues need to look at what is available on the market. I believe that this is beneficial to Hong Kong in general. But after the implementation of the legislation, I understand the adaptation period is 6 months. I understand that a society representing the retail trade has written us a letter. They represent the Hong Kong Retail Management Association. There are many customers who purchase plastic cutlery, and they need to make an order for the products to come from overseas, and that will take them a quarter. That is 3 to 4 months. Now, the products may arrive 3 to 4 months later, and then the products will go on sale. But the grace period will only be 6 months. Do you think that it is enough? Mr. Lok? Thank you, Chair. On the grace period of 6 months, during our public consultation on disposable tableware, we have discussed this with restaurant operators, and that is why we came up with the period of 6 months. But of course, we have repeatedly appealed to the trade that they should take action now instead of waiting for the law to come into effect. They should be prepared. I think that realistically speaking, if we can start our clause-by-clause examination, I think that perhaps we can't complete it by today's meeting. I understand that we have another meeting in June. And if this can be completed and second reading can be resumed, then, well, they will have 3 to 4 months more. I hope that through providing this period of time, the retail sector can prepare themselves and get alternatives as early as possible. On our green tableware platform, that is www.greentableware.com, a list of suppliers of alternatives is uploaded. I believe that they can look for alternatives there. Chair? Well, it is one issue whether or not they will be able to secure alternatives. But now it is another issue that they will only have 6 months to adapt to the new legislation. According to your assumption, after people order their goods from overseas, it takes them 3 to 4 months. The law hasn't come into effect yet, and they shouldn't stop selling such products now. What I'm telling you is the actual situation is that people ordered products overseas, and with the shipment date, it will take them 3 to 4 months. So you are now telling us that, well, you should assume that this legislation will be passed, and that's why you should stop ordering products. I don't find that reasonable, Chair. Well, if you say that it will take 9 months for the legislation to come into effect, I don't think that it will affect the environment that much. We need to think about the supply cycle. Next, Mr. Yu Patlan. Thank you, Chair. Regarding paper 01, paragraph 6, the last sentence. The administration said that the hotel trade in general has shown support and readiness for the proposed regulation. Well, I agree with the first half of the sentence. The hotel trade does support this initiative. And many hotels support environmental efforts. But as to whether or not they are ready, I have a big question mark. The hotel trade that I am in touch with has expressed concern on the timetable of the legislation and the adaptation period of 6 months, whether or not there will be available or affordable alternatives. These are the concerns that the trade has. And I think you understand that the hotel trade is facing a manpower crunch. I understand that after the ordinance comes into effect, there are two scenarios. First, providing alternatives. Second, charge customers. To charge customers actually involve manpower costs as well, and the trade has expressed concern. I thank the EPD for liaising with the hotel trade proactively, and they have conducted a briefing session. They have also been liaising with the Chamber of Commerce of the hotel trade. The hotel trade and guest houses are concerned about the effect that the legislation may have on their future operation. It will take time for them to get ready. And I hope that the alternatives will be affordable and will not increase the burden of the trade. A lot of chain hotels there are large-scale chain hotels and smaller-scale hotels. It may be more difficult for smaller hotels to procure the alternatives at an affordable price. No matter how long the legislation will be scrutinized, I hope that during the transition period, the administration can maintain close contact with the trade and while promoting a plastic-free culture. It will not cause any significant impact or negative impact on the trade, since there is already a manpower shortage in the hotel trade. We don't want tourists to have negative impression on hotel staff, and there may be misunderstanding or conflicts caused while charging customers for these products. This is what we don't want to see. I hope that during the scrutiny of the legislation or during the transition period, more promotion can be done so that tourists can be educated about this issue and they can support our environmental protection endeavors. Mr. Look, thank you, Mr. Yu, for meeting representatives of the hotel trade on our behalf. After the legislation becomes effective, should they require any assistance or clear guidelines, we'll be happy to help. We are not just rolling out this piece of legislation and then let the trade do their own thing. We need to provide assistance. We believe that the situation is rather unique. The regulation is that free distribution on disposable items is banned, but customers can pay for these products. Let's say plastic bottled water will no longer be freely distributed, but customers can buy them. As far as I know, many hotels do not offer these items for free now unless customers ask for it. Yes, there will have to be a transition. However, I believe that tourists understand that this is a global trend, something that countries all over the world are doing. And we think that we can promote this message through the tourism board to let tourists know about this arrangement. I understand that glass bottles are now placed in certain hotel rooms so the tourists or guests can reuse these bottles. Thank you. Next, Mr. Andrew Lam. Well, I think that there is no way I am opposing the general direction. However, when it comes to the implementation of the legislation, well, I understand that the administration has tried very hard to do their research and gather information. However, the information simply is insufficient. You haven't provided us with the amount of disposed plastic products. And we could see that you have provided us with the definition of disposable in other jurisdictions. Well, I also asked for any court judgment, but you haven't given us any. I understand that this is something new around the world. But exactly because of how new it is, when it comes to enforcement actions, there are lots of uncertainties. In addition, there may be loopholes in enforcement actions. Well, you can call it a loophole or gray area. What actually is the definition of disposable? If a disposable plastic fork is 10 cents and a disposable wooden fork is 50 cents, and if I manufacture a reusable plastic fork at 20 cents, then there is a place for it on the market. This is a gray area. And something that, well, I won't call it a loophole, but on the ban of free distribution, I support that completely. For families, especially smaller families, perhaps they will turn to online shopping. And that may be a loophole. In the enforcement actions in the future, first, I hope that the government will keep a close eye to monitor the situation. I won't talk about education or promotion. Many members have covered this. I think we need to understand public sentiments. After the legislation becomes effective for a period of time, but when the amount of disposed products do not decrease, then that will be a major problem. Now, we are not adopting the strategies on plastic bags. We are not completely banning these products. So if you look at the overall picture, this is indeed a good piece of legislation. But I can foresee that during enforcement actions, you may encounter many problems. Perhaps this can be adjusted during the clause-by-clause examination. But I would just like to express my views during this meeting. Mr. Look. Thank you. Regarding the definition of disposable, understand that there are certain products that may appear disposable, but actually you can use it multiple times. So that is why we have to look at the original design purpose. What is it intended to be used for? If we think that it is disposable, we still need to look at the design purpose. If it is of quality plastic and it is sold separately, then I have reason to believe that this is not a one-time use fork. But if you purchase a pack of plastic forks with 100 of them in one pack, then I'm confident to say that it is designed to be a single-use product. We have to look at the individual products and make a judgment. So we have to wait until enforcement actions are conducted to see how things will be implemented. But in terms of the legislation, we want to state clearly our intent, withdrawn reference from requirements in other jurisdictions. We hope that at least for our colleagues conducting enforcement actions, they will not be confused about the definition. We want to allow certain flexibility.
會唔會引致
Whether this will lead to more people turning to online shopping, well, for ordinary families, we cannot control the way they act. We cannot control them. But what about restaurants? We have already banned the use of these in restaurants. For takeaway, we also ban the use of single-use plastic tableware. So, even if one can source these tableware, the tableware cannot be used anyway. It cannot be distributed, for example. So, is it possible that some families will hoard a lot of these public tableware? If wooden forks and knives, if they have similar price, families in the community may still buy a lot of them, and in our opinion, families may not insist on using public tableware. So you will not ban the purchase of these items online. There are other alternatives, but what about those who will buy it for a party? You are not going to ban it. Is that the case for local online shopping? That is not permissible either. But for overseas jurisdiction, that is the places outside Hong Kong, then this does not fall under the area of this ordinance. In other words, we are just regulating local sales. Ms. Chen Hao-Yan. Thank you, Chairman. We thank the government for spending a lot of effort on explanation. A lot of members support this ordinance. But when it comes to the nitty-gritty of the ordinance, we need to think long and hard about the impact on citizens in the future. After the ban, can we really lower the amount of disposed items? Will it be in line with the original intent of the ordinance? I still want to talk about the non-medical use transparent gloves. As Chairman mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, in Phase 2, non-medical transparent gloves cannot be sold and cannot be distributed for free. Well, I definitely support banning distributing for free, but what about banning them for sale? What is the reason behind? If you are worried about an increase in the amount in landfills, there may be way more bottles or plastic bottles. You allow people to buy these plastic bottles, but you are going to ban the sale of these transparent gloves. How can you convince me? How can you convince me that you can actually go on to ban the sale of these transparent gloves? Just now, I was searching for alternatives. In the last meeting, I was giving you an example of making a cake. But actually, for cleaning at home or for very dirty children's items, it is difficult to clean them. If you are asking me to use lattice gloves as alternatives, I do not want to make it difficult for the administration. You can actually ban the free distribution, but then why are you going to ban the sale of these transparent gloves? Water bottles exert greater pressure on landfills, but you are not going to ban plastic bottles. I don't understand the logic. I want to focus on the ban on sales. That is similar to the opinion I gave just now. It all boils down to whether there are alternatives for bottles. There are a lot of alternatives. For example, locally, when we deal with plastic bottles, We will also start a producer responsibility scheme. That is, manufacturers will have to bear the burden of the recycling levy. Will they change to another kind of packaging? This is possible. And that is exactly one of the purposes of the producer responsibility scheme. We want them to be more environmentally friendly. But are the alternatives perfect? That is another issue. So we will leave it in the phase 2 for the time being. In the appendix to the bill today, it is just a regulatory framework showing that the government has a plan to regulate these items. But when it comes to the order, we will have to be practical. We will have regard to the actual situation. For more difficult items, we will have regard to the actual situation, and that will be our next step. The effective date is 6 months later. That is just an administrative plan. That is not set down in law. That is, administratively, the government wants to impose this in 6 months' time when everyone is ready. That is not carved in stone in the legislation. Well, Chairman, the ban on sale should be backed by more cogent arguments than a ban on distribution. I heard just now that you allow us to do online shopping overseas. Well, I mean to buy stuff from overseas websites. And that is quite different from your bill. You mention alternatives. The alternatives given by the administrations actually cannot replace the non-medical use of transparent gloves. Children often put the gloves inside the toilet bowl. Well, I actually just wear these transparent gloves and then I just pick up the items from the toilet bowl. The arguments put forward by the government are actually not cogent enough. Well, Ms. Chen, I have the same opinion, and I have mentioned this before. For non-medical use transparent gloves, well, I recommend banning the free distribution. But for the ban on sale, we may have to decide in the future. Environmental hygiene is very important, and that is close to our heart. Experts said that although the sixth wave is serious, it is still raging in Hong Kong. That is why citizens in Hong Kong are attaching great importance to environmental hygiene. Whether in home cleaning, public cleaning, or in the process of making food, it is still being used widely. Do we really need to go so far as to ban its sale? Well, you can go on to ban its free distribution, but you shouldn't ban its sale. And we may decide at a later date. You cannot tell us whether it is taking up a lot of space in landfills, but my sixth sense tells us that it does not. We will discuss it in a clause-by-clause scrutiny. But I think that this is actually a mainstream view when we discuss it time and again. And we can discuss this further in the clause-by-clause scrutiny phase. Mr. Chen Xiu-hong, second round, 3 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. I agree with Chairman and Ms. Chen. When we consider feasibility, we need to consider not only alternative but also environmental hygiene when it comes to alternatives. And I hope that we can discuss the principle in the face of clause-by-clause scrutiny. In a public hearing, citizens are actually very much concerned about over-packaging in paragraph 9 in the government's paper. It mentioned practical guide on packaging reduction and management. In May, it was already announced. It is anticipated within this year. Different trades, including hotel and tourism, electronic products, electrical appliance, and drinks manufacturing industries. What about delivery and e-commerce trade? Do you have any timetable for the overpackaging issue? Last year, you promulgated the practical guides on packaging reduction and management targeting supermarket and retail sector. Have you taken stock of the effectiveness? I will invite Assistant Director Mr. Kenneth Chang to take this question. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chan, for your question. The administration has been collaborating with the industry to draw up different practical guides for stores and supermarkets. As stated in the reply, we already issued the practical guide in May last year. In the coming year, we will announce the practical guide targeting e-commerce, logistics, as well as delivery. We anticipate that we will announce this practical guide within this year. This is just a practical guide for reference, but we have contacted the Hong Kong Exchange. How can we make it mandatory for the companies for reference in the ESG report? For other industries, we will continue this line of work. Well, a quick follow-up, Chairman. For the promotion of the concept of big waster, it is important as well to let consumers know that over-packaging goods should be turned away. They should turn to products that have simpler packaging. Education and publicity are very important as well. Next, Mr. Perry, you second round, 3 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. I am also concerned about items used in party in the green tableware platform. And in the last meeting, there was a price list of alternatives to tableware. This is actually very good. We enable the trade know what choice they have and the price of these choices. For the hotel trade and guest houses trade, people are concerned about different toiletries. Can you provide a similar list for the trade to show them the price and the availability of alternatives? We also mentioned bottled water. Actually, some hotels are using glass or even aluminum bottles. Well, I mean, aluminum cans. Is it possible to provide some subsidy schemes so that the trade can install water filtering system to be installed in the corridor so that the hotel guests can fill their water cans or water bottles? Thank you, Chairman. For shampoo, for example, after the legislation becomes effective, they cannot be provided to hotel guests. If need be, the guests need to pay for it. For larger bottles of shampoo, they can be placed inside the hotel room instead of smaller bottles, and this can be one of the alternatives. In the market, there are already different kinds that can replace the very small bottles of products for toothbrushes, brushes, or combs, etc. You need to pay for them before you can get them instead of getting alternatives. If hotels use non-plastic goods, well, of course, we welcome their practice. It depends on whether we can search for relevant information. Apart from the tableware platform, for other disposable plastic products, the alternatives to these products will also have a specific platform on which we will provide this information. For subsidies, we will have to give them some thought to see how we can help the hotel trade to provide a greener method to serve their guests. Thank you, Chairman.
Follow up. Just one more point, Chair. The administration said that hotels can charge their customers, but I think we all agree that this is not something that we want because it is not a good concept for customers to be able to pay for these items that are not environmentally friendly. And hotels will need to arrange additional manpower to charge their customers. If these items are placed in the rooms and customers will be charged anyway, then things will be more simple. But this will not be allowed. This involves complicated operational details. So if alternatives can be provided for customers, hotels will not have to employ that many additional staff members to handle this matter. Thank you. Next, Mr. Tony Tse. Thank you, Chair. Well, just then I mentioned this as well. There are different points of concern. People representing different trade or consumers or operators, certainly they have different views. For me personally, on reduction of plastic use, there is an imminent need. After it is implemented for some time, we still have to look at the impact on the environment. I think that this has been discussed for quite a while. When I went to a fast food shop to buy takeaway food, many people will request takeaway cutleries because they can use them. So from my experience, I believe that certain things will have to be made compulsory. Some members are concerned whether this will bring inconvenience. Well, this is certainly the case. But if we have too many concerns, we can't get things done. We have to make it compulsory, otherwise this will just drag on forever. Chair, I would just like to express my views on this. Because I haven't been able to express my views in the past meetings, they have clashed with my other meetings. Just then we talked about some issues relating to sale. Of course, this will bring inconvenience to people if these items are not for sale. But if we are able to put these plans into actions, I can see that many people are putting plastic bottles in recycling bins, etc. I hope that the government can do something about it. Very often I see that these bins are full. So many people are environmentally conscious. How can we help them take the extra step How can we push for more people to join the initiative? I think that we all need to make some sacrifices. What's important is that we need to strike a balance. Thank you. Any response or views? I thank Mr. Zhe for his support. I think we have the same goal. Well, actually, all members in our committee is trying hard to strike a balance. However, I think that you should be glad that members support the majority of the bill. I hope that you will not cast your net too widely. There may be certain items that may cause negative impact on the public and yet do not help much with the environment. So whether or not they should be banned or the sale of these items should be banned, I believe that you need to think about that. No other questions? Well, the Bills Committee has received written submissions by other organizations, and these submissions have been emailed to members. Administration will issue a written reply later. All right. I think that we can start the clause-by-clause examination since there are no other questions. So I would like to draw your attention to the bill, CB bracket 3103/2023, and the markup copy of the bill, CB bracket 1278/2023 bracket 1. I suggest that we can examine the Chinese version of the bill, and the legal advisor can help us with the English version. Of course, in the examination, if you have any question regarding the English version of the bill, then you can, of course, raise your questions, but our discussion will focus on the Chinese version. So now I'll invite the administration to go through the provisions one by one. Please refer to the two documents that I've just referred to. Chair, I would like to invite the Deputy Director to take this part. The Assistant Director, sorry, Mr. Kenneth Cheng. Please go through the clauses one by one. Thank you, Chair. Well, the aim of the bill is to amend the Product Eco-Responsibility Ordinance, that is CAP 603, and its subsidiary legislation, to do two things. That is, first, to refine the existing, that is, to control the disposable tableware and the existing producer responsibility schemes for electrical and electronic equipment, and the responsibility schemes for glass. So this is not included in the markup copy. It is in the blue bill. Page C24. Well, this is important. Any views? The first part of the blue bill, page C24. Any questions? Any views? Please continue. Part 1 of the bill, preliminary. First, 1. Short title and commencement. The bill may be cited as the Product Eco-Responsibility Amendment Ordinance 2023. As for commencement day, the ordinance comes into operation on a day to be appointed by the Secretary for Environment and Ecology by notice published in the Gazette. As I said, I will go on the regulation of plastic tableware and other plastic products. Our goal is that upon the passage of the bill, the first phase of the legislation can be implemented within 6 months. As for the refinement of the producer responsibility scheme for electrical and electronic equipment, new types of equipment will be added and recycling labels will be cancelled. We hope to implement the refinement by mid-2024. As for the delivery of notice of the two existing producer responsibility schemes, we want to implement the changes as quickly as possible after the ordinance comes into effect. We were talking about 16A or 16B, right? About the delivery of notice. I think we'll stop here. Mr. Chen Xiu-hong has questions. Yes, thank you, Chair. The commencement date is mentioned in the preliminary. Just then, Mr. Chang said that after the passage of the bill, the legislation will come into effect within 6 months. I hope that the administration can give this further thought. Members have expressed concern on the availability of alternatives and whether or not the trade is ready. 6 months is a date that you have planned, but perhaps you can liaise with the sector or the trades to see if the actual situation allows this period. Well, in this examination, the specific commencement date is not given. But in our past meetings, members have expressed their views regarding the commencement date, whether it should be 6 months or not. I understand that there may be difficulty in terms of operation for the trade. I hope that the government can take note of that. But this is not part of the examination. Next, Mr. Yu Pat-Leung. Thank you, Chair. I have the same view as Mr. Chen Xiu-hong. 6 months should be a reference point, but during the implementation, I hope that the government can gauge the readiness of the trade and the availability of alternatives to ensure smooth operation, especially from the view of the hotel trade. I hope that this does not coincide with our peak season, otherwise that would be quite challenging. And I hope that before the implementation, you can liaise with the trade sufficiently to ensure smooth implementation. All right. No other views? Just then you were talking about 16A and 16B, right? Delivery of notice. So please turn to 0001 of the markup copy. Thank you, Chair. In the bill, we will add Part 2A. That is under the PRSW and GPRS. Regarding service of notices, the requirements are consolidated in Part 2A. In Clause 16B, by adding Clause 16A, 16B, and 16C, other than mailing the notices to the director, it can also be done by facsimile transmission, email, and specified system. And for record generated by the means establishes that the notice was sold sent, and they will be considered sent. After reviewing the implementation of the two producer responsibility schemes, we believe that electronic means of notice services can be incorporated to streamline the administrative work and enhance work effectiveness. Thank you.
其實並非係
Well, that is not just for the single-use plastic products. That is for the overall producer responsibility scheme. So you want to add this as well, is that correct? Yes, we want to take advantage of this bill to refine the whole regime. Well, is the legislative intent or the wording? Do members have any views? If there's none, we can carry on. Well, pardon me, Mr. Chen. Yes, thank you, Chairman. I didn't have opportunity Well, I mean for 16A application of Part 2A, this part applies in relation to regulated electrical equipment and regulated articles. Let me explain. Cap 603 mentioned the scheme of the 4 electrical appliances and computer. One of the regulated items is glass. For the same items or for the service of notices, each of them has their own set of different parts. So for electrical appliances and computers, we have one set of provisions, and for glass, we have yet another set of provisions. So we want to consolidate the provisions and move it to Part 2A. So in clause 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the bill, you can see that we have already deleted those provisions and we have already moved those provisions to here. So for regulated items, you add plastic, is that correct? No, that is not the case. We add glass, actually. That was in relation to bottled drinks in 2016. So members may not know whether this has an impact on regulated plastic products, so you have to explain this more clearly. But that is not in relation to our topic today. But given the fact that it is an amendment, it is our responsibility to scrutinize it as well. It may not be directly related to single-use plastic products. Next, Mr. Andrew Lam. I just want clarifications for registered suppliers. How many statutory registries do we have right now? When you implement them, well, do you draw reference from all these registries? Well, I mean all these registers. We mentioned the 4 electrical appliances and computers. There were over 300 suppliers. For the new regulated items, that is the suppliers of glass bottles, the suppliers numbered over 1,000. I'm not asking about the figures. These suppliers do not register through your department, is that correct? No, that is not the case. They register through us. These producer responsibility schemes are implemented by the government, so the suppliers register through the EPD. So for the register of the registered suppliers in this ordinance, It is within the purview of the EPD, is that correct? Yes, that is correct. Let us continue. Still question, Mr. Chen? I may be asking this question too soon, but it is related. In part 4 and 5, we have added service of notices for the relevant suppliers. They need to register so that they can be contacted for communication. When we add part 6, regulated plastic products, do we also have the information of the registered suppliers so that there could be service of notices? Is that the case? Well, they are different in nature. For register, under the producer responsibility schemes for electrical appliances and computers or for glass bottles, they are responsible for submitting reports to the government on a regular basis, such as how many glass bottle drinks they have distributed, so that we can calculate the recycling levy. That is the purpose. So the purpose is different from the regulation over plastic products. Well, I mean single-use plastic products. So for single-use plastic products, there is no levy. But for the method of recycling, that is another issue. For electrical appliances and computers, there are levies, etc. There is a clear mechanism in place. To be concrete, in clause-by-clause scrutiny, they are actually not directly related to single-use plastic products. So I reminded the administration, please make it clear when you take us through the relevant parts so that we will not ask about plastic products in this connection. Thank you. Let us continue. Also, on the service of notices, we mentioned adding Part 2A, and we have consolidated all provisions in relation to the service of notices. So for 38, 40, 52, 54, all the parts about service of notices have already been deleted, as we have already consolidated all these parts in 16A, B, and C. If there's no question, we can continue. Then we can go to part 3. Well, maybe you can let us know the page of the marked up copy so we can follow more easily. Marked up copy, page 12. Page 12, yes, that is correct for part 3. Ms. Andrew Lam. Thank you, Chairman. We talked about registered suppliers. For marked up copy, page 9, 54. First, the relevant supplier. In law, what is the difference between relevant suppliers and registered suppliers? Are they in line with each other? Any conflict in enforcement action? For regulated article, it points to glass bottles and electrical appliances and computers. There is no change, but what does relevant supplier mean? Maybe the administration can give us a brief response. Supplier means in the context of electrical appliances and computers, the distributor, importers, or the manufacturer of these items, or for glass bottle, the providers, the suppliers, distributors of these products to the retail level. And that is our definition of supplier in law. So these are relevant suppliers, and when they have registered, they are called registered suppliers. So they are actually not the same. Relevant suppliers are not the same as registered suppliers. Well, if they do not register, they are not registered suppliers under the producer responsibility scheme. If they need to supply these products, well, they have to register with us first. Let us continue. Well, Mr. Chen Xiu-hong. Thank you, Chairman. Can the administration help us to jog our memory? In page 9, recovering container recycling levy by assessment notice, there are the words "not yet in operation" in brackets underneath. Can the administration explain these words? The marked up copy was prepared before the 1st of May this year, and the PRS of the glass bottle was not enforced, so there was no recovering container recycling levy back then. But right now, at this moment, there is already container recycling levy. Well, that is not a typo. That is not a mistake. It was just a case when the document was printed that was not enforced yet. The marked up copy was prepared by the Legislative Council. Well, member is actually concerned whether there is any further amendment to the provision. Well, no amendment, then we can continue. And a marked up copy, 0012. One question, Mr. Andrew Lam. Well, are there any suppliers that do not need to register? That actually concerns the provisions of the producer responsibility scheme in other provisions. We may take some time, but never mind. Administration, please, under the the producer responsibility scheme, if you have to supply these items, then you have to register with us. You cannot supply these items without registration. That is against the law. If that is the case, why do we not amend the relevant supplier? Well, we have already explained this. If you need to conduct business, then you have to register. If you do not register, then you are against the law. You cannot conduct business. Is my understanding correct? Mr. Andrew Lam was referring to Section 54. For example, in the context of glass drinks, for the regulated article mentioned in subsection brackets 1 brackets B, this will be repeated yet again, and that is how the law is drafted. The relevant supplier, this term is just an abbreviation that actually refers to the supplier of a regulated article, and that is sort of shorter form. Members, please pay attention. As I mentioned, this bill the service of the notices is amended, hence the change, and that does not have any impact on the scheme in operation. That is about the electrical appliances and computers. Members do not need to worry about these. Otherwise, we will need to have 2 more bill committees. They are already up and running. We do not need to worry about all these schemes. Apart from the methods of the service of notices, there is no further amendment. Is that correct? Well, Chairman, we will need to add washing machine, dehumidifiers, and the tumble dryers in the electrical appliances and computers. We will need to amend the recycling label. Well, we will discuss it at a later stage, but for right now, we are just talking about the issues arising from the service of notices. Mr. Andrew Lam, well, my question is actually very simple. Under the same ordinance, there are 2 different terms, and I just want to get it clear. What is the overlapping area of these terms? I do not want any misunderstanding in the course of enforcement action. The Deputy Director mentioned that underneath the term relevant suppliers, there is a chunk of words, and that is just a short form. And in enforcement action, we just focus on registered suppliers, and we do not pay attention to whether the relevant supplier is a registered supplier or not. As the chairman said, the supplier can be a registered supplier, but then it does not conduct business. And that has nothing to do with whether it has registered or not.
其實
Well, on the provisions regarding REEs or the GPRS, a definition was given on supplier. Let's say under the GPRS, for persons who conduct a certain procedures in the manufacture of glass bottle, or a registered supplier who distributes such products, or Section 54, recovering container recycling levy by assessment notice. If you are a supplier of a regulated article, then we put it in brackets, relevant supplier. Since in the subsections that follow, let's say the notices will have to be, the director may serve an assessment notice on the relevant supplier. Well, this is just a short term. In the drafting of the law, there is no confusion between the definition, because we have stated clearly who the registered suppliers are. And they have to register with the EPD before they can distribute those products. All right. So from page 1 to page 11 of the markup copy, they're on the service of notice. All right. So as I said, in those parts, there are no other amendments. If there are no questions, then we have completed the examination from page 1 to page 11. Thank you. Now, page 12, part 3. Amendments related to new regulated electrical equipment. That is to expand the category of the REE. First, amendment of Section 3 interpretation. In Schedule 6, we have added Part 1 of Schedule 6. So in the interpretation, if Schedule 6 is mentioned, we have to add Part 1 of Schedule 6. Please continue. These are just some technical amendments. And then later, more specific changes will be mentioned. And Section 42 is also a technical amendment. Column 2, we will add part 1, and then amendment of Schedule 6. Schedule 6 will be divided into 2 parts. The first part on regulated electrical equipment. First part on regulated electrical equipment. As the paper mentioned, regulated electrical equipment will be amended to include larger electrical equipment, including for refrigerator. The largest volume will be amended from 500 liters to 900 liters. As for washing machines, from 10 kilograms to 15 kilograms. And we will add tumble dryer with drying capacity not exceeding 15 kilograms and dehumidifier included as part of the regulated electrical equipment. Any questions? No, please continue. If there are no questions, we'll move on to page 17 of the markup copy. Supplementary provisions. Explaining the definition of mains electricity and rated drying capacity and its calculation. Up to now, provisions dealing with the new regulated electrical equipment have been handled. All right, slow down, please. I'll see if members have any questions. Mr. Chen Siu-hung. Well, I have a question regarding Part 2 supplementary provisions. Mains electricity. Well, I don't have the original text. Why was this included? Is this used to calculate the rated drying capacity? Why is the voltage and the frequency of the mains electricity added? Why were they added? So this was added, right? Supplementary provisions, adding the details of mains electricity. Well, how will this apply to the regulated electrical appliances? In which chapter will the concept of mains electricity be used? Please refer to page 16, tumble dryer. A household appliance, or in B, that uses mains electricity as the only power source for heating and has a rated drying capacity not exceeding 15 kilograms. Page 16, right? Yes, page 16, bottom right corner, tumble dryer, B. For other products that are already regulated under this part, will they use mains electricity as well? But the voltage and the frequency were not provided, right? I don't see a need to include these, since these equipment are used in Hong Kong. So Mr. Chen Siu-hung has a point there. Why was this added? Chair? Since there are tumble dryers that uses electricity and there are dryers that use gas, since the provisions only covered electrical equipment. But my question was, in the past, the REE used electricity as well, so why was this not included? Chair? As you can see, all the definitions that we have stated have drawn reference from CAP 598. the energy efficiency labeling of products ordinance. So when we included tumble dryer, we decided to add the definition of mains electricity. Well, tumble dryer that uses mains electricity as the only power source for heating, that means dryers powered by electricity, right? Do you have to add mains electricity and its voltage? Well, if I refer to CAP 598, actually there is no definition of tumble dryer. For all electrical appliances, this provisions on mains electricity is included. So that is why we are including it here. As for dehumidifier, since the definition is given in CAP 598, that is why we did not include it here. Because that was defined in CAP 598 already, right? But tumble dryer is not included in CAP 598. So the same wordings are used, right? Well, tumble dryer is not included in CAP 598. Well, I'm aware of that. But for other electrical appliances, the words mains electricity are used. Is that right? Well, if these words are used, then we shouldn't dwell on this problem. Right? Mr. Andrew Lam. Chair. Something just clicked for me. I understand that some products actually use batteries. It is my understanding that these battery-run products are not regulated. Is that correct? Well, for the 8 items covered under the REE, for the 8 items, they are all plugged-in electrical appliances. So you have no intention to regulate battery-run products. Is that right? That is correct. I think this was explained earlier. REE run on electricity as well. How come this concept of mains electricity was not mentioned before? But actually, the administration has explained that the definition is set out in CAP 598. However, since CAP 598 does not cover tumble dryer, that is why this definition is included. Well, I agree with Mr. Andrew Lam. There are tumble dryers that do not run on mains electricity. There are ones that run on gas and hand roll tumble dryer. All right. Now we move on to page 18, Schedule 1. We have added the amount of recycling levy according to the prevailing government policies. The recycling levy should cover the recycling costs. So for these new items included, the recycling levy will be set at an amount that is comparable to similar electrical equipment. So tumble dryer's recycling levy is comparable to washing machine, that is $125. As for dehumidifier, it is similar to air conditioner, $125. As for refrigerators with larger capacity, the recycling levy remains unchanged. They are $165 and $125 respectively. Any comments? No, please continue.
好，咁咧就
For Schedule 2, about electrical appliances and computer, there needs to be particular wording contained in receipts, saying that levy has already been paid. And I will take this opportunity to refine the words. Any question? Any question from members? If there's no question, we can carry on. On page 20, in section 2 interpretation, as we change schedule 6 to part 1 schedule 6, so we also need to amend the waste disposal ordinance. We just need to amend the name there. Section 18 brackets 4 of the waste disposal ordinance, we will make these technical amendments. We will change schedule 6 to part 1 of schedule 6. Any question? If there's no question, we can carry on. Then, page 25. The electrical appliances and computer. There is recycling label, and we will delete the requirement of recycling label. In clause 31, interpretation of part 4, we have made an amendment. For the part about recycling label, the definition will be deleted. It is not necessary. I mean, the label is not necessary anymore. Any question? The administration can briefly explain, for example, the background. Why is the recycling label not necessary on the product? Well, on CAP 603, when a new product of electrical appliances or computer is purchased, first of all, the supplier needs to pay a levy, and you will see a shiny label on the computer or the product that serves as proof, proving that the recycling levy has already been paid. But back then, when it became effective, a new batch of electrical appliances had to pay the levy, whereas another batch did not have to pay the levy. We just wanted to differentiate these two batches of electrical appliances. Nowadays, the products have already paid the relevant levy, so we do not need to set this out clearly. The supplier actually needs to buy this label from us. We just want to streamline the process, so we take this opportunity to delete this requirement. That is the proof of the recycling label having been paid. We do not need this label anymore. The levy has already been paid. Well, then a lot of formalities can be dispensed with. If there's no question, let's carry on. For the following amendments, all the way through page 30, amending 35, 36, 44 for part 3A. Because of the absence of the label, so for all these provisions, the wording label will be deleted. Any question? Because of the very same reason, a lot of provisions will have technical amendments by having these words deleted. If there's no question, let's go to page 31. Despite the deletion of the recycling label, we will add Division 7, Savings and Transitional Provisions. In other words, for the products that still have labels, report still has to be made to us. In accordance with the current law, they still need to keep it for 5 years, and that is the savings and transitional provisions to deal with the items that still have labels. No question, no comments, we can continue. Page 35, starting from page 35. By the same token, we seek to amend subsidiary legislation B, Product Eco Responsibility Regulated Electrical Equipment Regulation. Likewise, we will delete all the provisions in which, to delete the words recycling label in all the provisions. Any comment? Well, I think there's none. That is still about the same point. On the refinement of the provisions of the two producer responsibility scheme, we have already dealt with all these. Starting from page 44, we start to deal with the amendments to plastic products. Let's continue. We still have a little bit of time. We can first talk about the purpose of the ordinance. On the amendments relating to plastic products, first of all, we will amend Section 2, the purpose of this ordinance. We will add the prohibition or restriction on the manufacture, sale, supply, distribution, use, or display of certain products. For the regulation of plastic products, we will add that to the purposes of this ordinance. Mr. Tony Te. Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to be clear. In Section 2, brackets 1A, you add and other plastic products. I'm not sure about the meaning. Does it refer to all plastic products? Or is the scope confined to just plastic shopping bags? I'm not sure. I wanted to be clear. If it covers all other plastic products, will it be too wide? Will the scope be too wide? The net seems to be wider, but we also need to be more concrete or specific in relation to the regulation. Yes, indeed. Section 2 is about the purposes of this ordinance. It sets down what kind of products that we can regulate. 1A originally did not cover any tableware or disposable plastic products. So, in this section, we just add other plastic products. So we can, in the following provisions, regulate other plastic products. In relation to what other products are covered, we will set down more clearly in the following provisions. For example, tableware, oxo-degradable products, etc. We intend it to be wider, but we need to keep this wide coverage so that we can include other provisions. So, to a certain degree, You want this ordinance to be clearer by adding other plastic products, but you do not intend to regulate all other plastic products. Is that correct? Well, I believe that is correct. Well, for packaging materials, the scope is indeed very wide, and that is open to further exploration. For this section to be written in a wider manner, there will be a list, there will be different ways to regulate these products, and for the sake of purposes, well, I think that this amendment and other plastic products is appropriate. Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to be clearer. For example, prohibition, restriction on the manufacture, sale, supply, distribution, use, or display. You just want the scope to be wider. But for the ban on sale, you will also specify which kind. Let's see if we still have time to cover amendment to 40. Well, I'm not talking about page 45, I mean page 44. Is there any further comment on the prohibition or restriction on the manufacture, sale, supply, distribution, use, or display of certain products? We can finish all the amendments on this page in this section, and we will not start the next section today. Any question about the purposes of this ordinance? If there's no question, we will end the meeting here. It's about time to conclude the meeting. For the date of the next meeting, the Secretariat will inform members. If members have no further questions, we will end the meeting here. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.